So, what is missing in our educational systems today?
Well, I think what we're missing is actually modernizing our approach to what we teach based on what the science shows us, right? So we know scientifically that mindfulness, so where we draw our awareness to our internal experience in the present moment, will cultivate a greater attention span, will regulate our nervous system, will allow us to have access to our higher thinking brain, which improves problem solving and performance and creativity and clarity, and ultimately develops a stronger sense of self and a deeper connection to what the body is communicating to us in terms of our emotional experience. And these are life skills that we all need, because no matter where we come from, we're all going to face stress and adversity and challenge. And so the more we can cultivate essentially our own awareness to our internal experience, this empowers us to become more aware how we are personally responding to life's experiences, and then learning tools that allow us to self-regulate.
Okay, so what is self regulation, and why is an understanding of the nervous system important for kids? Or for teachers or for anyone involved with kids?
So your question was, why teach about the nervous system?
Let's just start with that. Why do we teach? Why should we teach about the nervous system?
Okay. So I think the most important reason why we want to teach some basic understanding about the nervous system is because it's not just about the nervous system, though. It's about emotions too. Right? So, okay, so let's start from that perspective. Okay. So I think we tend to focus so much on intellectual knowledge. But that's only half of the puzzle, because our holistic being includes our feeling experience. And so we want to cultivate teaching that promotes deeper awareness of the emotional and feeling experience. Because we know scientifically that the emotional state influences the heart rhythms and the nervous system. Why does this matter? It matters because if we are experiencing negative emotions and we don't have the proper tools to self-regulate, we will be dysregulated, which means that affects our whole higher thinking brain. So our ability to perform, to retain memory, to learn, to be creative, to problem solve, to think clearly and make decisions, and to be more in tune with our intuition is all hindered when we're dysregulated. If we can understand how the biology of stress works within our bodies, which applies to all human beings, then it allows us to hold more compassion and understanding for our internal process. So that when we feel difficult emotions or we feel stress, we can understand that in that space, those are not the times, for example, to make decisions or to try to have a difficult conversation, or maybe to sit down and create something or to perform an exam, right? And that also gives us more compassion and understanding for someone else's process. So if someone is emotionally triggered or upset and they're in a dysregulated state, we can take that knowledge, that understanding of the biology of stress, and say, okay, this person is not in a space in which they have capacity to connect, to understand what I'm trying to teach, or to see a different perspective. And so when we understand that, we can take that pause, right? We can self-soothe. We can find our center again and then come back to whatever that task is, that conversation, etc. But it requires us to understand a little bit about the mechanics of the body and how it is that we respond to stress. And then to cultivate a mindfulness practice where we start to learn our own unique responses. What is our specific body communicating to us? How does my body respond to anger or frustration, to challenge and adversity? And then what can I do for myself to bring myself back into center so that I can perform at my best? I also think it's really important that we teach some basics around the biology of stress and the nervous system, and how emotional and mental thoughts and feelings can affect us, because we as the adults need to be able to check ourselves to to make sure that we are in a state of coherence, that we are in a state of calmness or peacefulness when we're trying to teach our youth, because they learn from what we model. So when they're having a difficult experience or they're facing a lot of stress, they're emotionally triggered, they learn how to self-soothe and self-regulate by attuning to our nervous system. So once we're in a space of heart coherence and we are regulated, that models and mirrors back to them that it's safe to feel what they feel. It's safe to go through that natural human experience of feeling stress or feeling a difficult emotion. And from that mirroring, they learn eventually that they can self-regulate themselves, that it's okay to feel, it's okay to process, and it's okay to release. And so the skill set, and that's just it, self-regulation is a skill set, right? It's something that we train. And we learn how to train this first as children by the example that is set by our primary caregiver in how they choose to regulate. Then that is co-regulation. So in their calmness, we're able to find calmness within ourselves with our experiences. It feels safe to feel difficult emotions. It feels safe to have a tantrum. It feels safe to express what is happening. And then that programs the nervous system to know and understand that safety can exist in those experiences. And then eventually we develop a stronger sense of internal resources to self-regulate. So even as adults, we need a healthy balance between self-regulation and co-regulation because we are social beings and we need to feel a sense of safety and connection, that we are seen and heard in our authenticity. This is ultimately what makes the nervous system feel safe. And so it's really about a balance between the two, even in adulthood, but particularly important to understand this when we are teaching, guiding, or working with youth in any capacity.
And most teachers or most people who are working with youth right now have no knowledge of any of this or no training with any like emotional regulation, nervous system makeup, or co-regulation. Like that's pretty much absent.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, right? Because it's so critical to even the child's capacity to learn, right? Because when we're dysregulated, we lose access to the prefrontal cortex. We lose basically access to the higher thinking brain. And so really, when we think about education, a priority in our education system really ought to be to ensure that we're always creating spaces of safety for the nervous system and that we understand what the nervous system needs in order to feel safe, right? Because it really optimizes learning, it optimizes problem solving and creativity, etc. I think the biggest aha moment for me was to realize that I've had this privilege of being educated, to have quite I guess the big aha moment for me was to realize that I've had the privilege to receive a lot of education, but none of that education actually was helpful in terms of everyday living, right? Every single human on this earth is going to experience stress, adversity, challenge, and a lot of us are going to experience trauma. And yet we don't teach the very basic knowledge around how the body responds to stress, particularly emotional stress. We don't teach this. And if we did teach it, we could help people understand that their experiences are normal, right? That they're completely valid and that everybody experiences them, that we're all wired in a sense this way. And then that opens the door for greater understanding, one of self, but also of the other, so that we can hold more space when someone is going through a difficult emotional time, right? And so, yeah, it's really interesting that we don't teach about the nervous system or the biology of stress or mindfulness practices that encourage more self-awareness about what we're experiencing in terms of the body and emotionally, because this is something that we know we're all going to experience every day, right? We're all going to go through the variety of emotional experience. And that is going to mean that we're going to experience negative or depleting emotions. I think it's really important for us as adults to be more conscious and aware of our own emotional experience, because whatever we are feeling in any given moment will influence and affect the people that we are around. So if I show up grumpy, then I'm going to influence your energy. And this is scientific. It's going to affect your heart rhythms. My heart rhythms can affect yours, and yours can affect mine. And so this is why we need to be responsible, particularly as adults and caregivers, teachers, educators, anyone who is working with the youth, to ensure that we're always actually clear on what it is that we're feeling and what we're bringing into that space. Particularly when we think about co-regulation. Because as I remain calm or in a state of a replenishing emotion, then that has an effect on the heart rhythms of all the children or youth that are in my space.
And what's a replenishing emotion? What's replenishing
So
emotions?
replenishing emotion is any positive emotion. So love, joy, peace, harmony, confidence, courage, anything that is actually going to add energy back to our system. And in fact, this is actually producing what we call the vitality hormone. And so it literally replenishes the energy of the body. Every time we experience a positive emotion, we bring the body into coherence. It operates as one synchronistic instrument in perfect coordination. And so we optimize the performance of the nervous system, the immune system, the hormonal system, and also our access to our brain.
So are you saying that if I'm feeling grumpy, if I'm feeling cranky, if I'm feeling a negative emotion, that I should just not go to work, or that I can't work with kids? Or what do you mean? So if I'm feeling not a replenishing emotion, if I'm feeling anger, grief, fear, one of those things, what do I do? Like, I work with kids every day. What do I do?
Right. So first of all, it's completely okay to feel a negative emotion or a depleting emotion. That is just the reality of life. And we're meant to experience this whole variety of emotions. The key is actually not to resist that negative emotion, but rather to allow it. Right? So the second we acknowledge that we feel, the second we become aware, that we're consciously aware that we're feeling something that is negative, whether it's sadness, anger, resentment, insecurity, shame, etc. When we have the capacity to notice and to sit with this, to allow it, and then also to cultivate tools that allow us to come back into a space of regulation, but doing this without any kind of judgment towards the negative feeling. Because the judgment in itself is dysregulating. It's acceptance, really. It's all about acceptance. And so I think the key is to notice and be aware. So if I'm aware that I'm having a particularly grumpy day, and now I'm going to go sit in front of a group of youth that I am guiding, it is my responsibility to be aware of what I'm feeling and to take a moment to pause, to center myself back, to come back into a space of regulation before I enter into that room.
So acknowledging the grumpiness, moving it aside for the moment, and doing the work that you need to do, or letting it sit with, like you're sitting with it, it's still there, but you are calm enough or regulated enough to teach.
Yeah, I think this is where the power of a pause is really important, right? So if I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling anger, right? And that's okay. But can I take just a pause or a few moments to reconnect back to my internal experience, to use a technique to bring myself back into coherence, so that when I'm going in front of those youth, I'm coming from a space of coherence. So there's simple tools that we can use to just like turn down that volume of stress within the body.
Or to turn down that negative experience.
The negative experience,
the negative emotion.
It doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily escape.
Yeah.
Right? We may still need to process that further, but we have the ability to actually turn down that negative experience and to create a sense of coherence in the body and in the heart specifically, so that when we come into a space, we come fully present and in a space of coherence, knowing that we're responsible for how we show up because it actually influences other people.